I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this. Every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit? So that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone, to our viewers across North America and around the world. Thank you so much for joining us on What's Your Work Fit. We've got a great show today. And by the way, this is the last live show until we start up again in March 2023. And that creates an opportunity for you. If you submit a question that we use as our main question on a future show, you can get a brand new embroidered What's Your Work Fit baseball cap. Manufactured in the United States. I would love to send one out to you. Again, here's the rub. It's got to be a great question, and we have to accept it as a future show episode. So without further ado, let's get started here. Welcome to Briar Dougherty. She is the CEO and founder of Career Organic, which helps scores of professionals with career coaching, strategy development, and resume writing. And today we ask her a question. Hi, Briar. I should say hello to you first before I ignore you. How are you?
Good morning, Dan.
Good morning to you. Our question today comes from Roberta, who, by the way, is going to get one of those baseball caps. She is a middle manager who has done well in her marketing career at a well-known insurance company brand, but she feels like she's missed out on some big opportunities to use her digital marketing management skills, and she freely admits working on updating and improving my resume has been an afterthought. And the best that I do is add new assignments onto my LinkedIn profile. So Roberta asks you, Briar, is it time for a resume redo? What do you have to say about that?
Well, there's a couple of things that come to mind hearing her background as well. And when you're thinking about a resume redo, there's a couple of things that you have to keep in mind. One is, are you keeping yourself relevant so that if an opportunity pops up, you can take advantage of that, which it seems like that might be part of the issue here. And then two is, if you are going after that next role, understanding what your target is before you start just putting a bunch of bullets and content onto a resume. And I think a lot of people struggle with that because it's translating what you have done into what you want to do. And so if we're looking at middle management and opportunities that have been passed by, we're looking at achievements that may not have been realized on a resume or even in performance reviews that have translated well to those supervisors or that executive team.
You know, my mother always says, don't go shopping on an empty stomach, and it's the greatest advice in the world. I suppose some of that is true for revising a resume, and that you need to have time to think out where you're going, what your why is, correct?
Yes, very much.
As part of the strategy that you work out with your clients, what are some of the first steps before you even pick up a pen to start editing that old resume? What are some of the first steps that you take with your candidates to get that done?
Sure. Great question, because it's the most important question. So at Career Organic, we write resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn. Before we'll start any branding project, we require our clients to provide a job posting, at least one, if not 3, 5. So we get an understanding of what that target is. Because anytime you're rewriting your brand or your resume or even LinkedIn profiles, you want to understand who you're speaking to. And so, for instance, a great example is if you're changing industries. So if you're coming from, say, the tech world, and now you're going into CPG, right, consumer product goods, and you're looking at operations and taking all of that really cool tech stuff you've done and translating that, if you speak in technology terms, your new audience, your new hiring team is going to not understand half of what you're saying in your resume, let alone in the interview. And so when we identify where we're going, we can then rewrite our brand and translate a lot of that into the new language. And this often happens with our military professionals, transitioning and separating out of military. There's a lot of very interesting words that are used in their reports and their annual reviews and performance reviews. And we have to translate that. So as resume writers, we're looking at things that we're talking about tactical teams, and we need to translate that for civilian roles where we're not, one, scaring the hiring team off, because there's some really fun roles that we've come across. And then two, that we're easily transitioning them into this new role where it makes sense. The hiring team and the recruiter can really see what their skill set is without having to dig very deep or spend a lot of time on it.
Well, this is what it feels like, I think, for most people to revise that resume. And you talk about military. I used to live in Stafford, Virginia, which was the southern border of the Marine Corps base in Quantico. So I never worked in a paid fashion with anybody who came out of the Marine Corps. But a lot of the people that were there were neighbors, and they had all this logistics knowledge. But after being in the Marine Corps for 20 years, they spoke in what they called alphabet vomit.
Yeah.
And I said, no one's going to understand what you're talking about. I was the last person to guide them to business speak.
Yep.
But I worked with a few people, and you know what? They got great logistics executive careers as a result.
It's incredible what you can do when you can translate your experience. And back to your first question, if you don't know where you're going, you don't know what that translation needs to be. And that's a big miss that I see most often in the market.
I want to get into the mechanics of the resume and really kind of look at those things in a bit, but I want to get to some questions and comments first. Thank you, Leon. Leon Glazer asks, how would one identify non-negotiable aspects of their next desired position versus what they should be willing to be flexible on? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. And hi, Leon. So I would say that first we need to look at what skill sets you want to bring to the table, right? So I often give this, and I'll give a little anecdote. I played softball when I was younger. I was really, really good. I was on a traveling team. I was a center fielder and a shortstop. I was very quick, had a great arm. And I hated it.
Really?
Oh, my goodness. I played basketball as well. I was very passionate about basketball. And I got, I was getting recruited for college eventually for that as well. And so good athlete. However, softball for me was a drain on my energy. I was stressed. I didn't like the one-on-one environment where, you're going up to bat, it's all on your back versus that really, integrated team environment that I got with basketball. And so I ended up quitting. A couple of years in, I was like, this is just, it's too much emotionally and energy wise. And then I was able to devote a lot more time into the things that I was much more passionate about. And it made me even more successful to keep an eye on the things that, yes, I had a strength in, but that I didn't really want to utilize. And why am I telling that story?
Mm.
Because a lot of us start our job search from a strength perspective, not a fulfillment and strength perspective. And so when we're looking at that, I want to say, the non-negotiables are typically where we don't want to spend our energy, right? So it might be that, I have a lot of people that come in and they'll say like, well, I need to really work on public speaking to get my next job. And I'm like, so you really like public speaking? You're just scared. And it's like, I hate public speaking. Like, I don't like being in front of people. I never want to be in front of people. And so they start focusing their energy in a skill set that they really don't want to utilize. So first understanding what is the skill set that does bring you joy, that does allow you to feel good and energizes you to learn the things that maybe you're a little weaker at right now. Okay. And that kind of becomes the non-negotiable list is I don't want to invest more energy and more time developing this. And so why get a role that's the emphasis? Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. And it really gets into my thing, which is what's your work fit? That person who says to you, I gotta deal with public speaking. I hate it. And I got to integrate it into my resume. And you're like, wait a minute, let's go back. What gives you joy? Who are you? What's your why? All those things.
Right. Well, and it also translates, right? So we're talking about resumes, but a resume is supposed to translate into interviews and interviews into a job offer, right? And you have to think if you're putting all of this stuff on your resume about skills that you're really not impassioned about,
right,
that's going to come across in the interview. So picking the stories and the things that you're passionate about or that you enjoyed or that you're proud of often helps you understand what you're going after, what actually excites you. And so sometimes the process of building the resume gives you that list of, hey, I'm good at sales and I don't mind that being an ancillary like part of the role, but it shouldn't be the shining focus. And so some of that kind of grunt work when you're doing your content for your resume, just kind of putting it all down and brainstorming really gives you those answers.
Well, I want to get to a question that my dear friend Courtney Owens posted. Courtney actually works in leadership in, I believe, at Cornell University now up in Ithaca, New York. And she says, as you continue to find what your work fit is in life, what advice would you provide a young professional when taking leaps of faith into your next? I love that, but let's frame it around. That's great. Now, how do you communicate that into your resume?
Sure. So I think young professional, and a lot of the advice going into young professionals up until I'd say a few years ago has really been that, you go to college or you do some sort of certification, and then that's the field you stay in.
Right.
So it's going to be this like long train ride, like, working in telecommunications, you're going to work in telecommunications forever. And that's not how we work anymore, right? And so you can be in sales and you can transition into operations. Last year, I worked with a ship captain who transitioned into software engineering.
Oh, wow.
And that's a big move. And so when we think about it as a young professional, because that's how the question's framed, I think about first opening up and saying, you can maneuver, you're not stuck. There is no box holding you back. It is your own thoughts and confidence and ability to learn new skills that keeps you striving forward or keeps you from doing so. And so when I think about resume building, I think about the big problem with young professionals is what experience do I have and how do I document it? And I find a lot of graduates, and that could be high school or college, that have no idea how to talk about the experiences they had while they were in school, those academic experiences, because they're valuable. If you're doing project work, I work with a company called General Assembly, where I support students and seekers transitioning into the tech world. And they do projects. I mean, they're doing 400 to 500 hours of certification. And so they're working on actual projects together in a team environment. And so instead of just saying, hey, we built an app, it's, well, I worked on a team of 3. I owned the front end development of this project while the other two owned the back end, and starting to talk about where you actually live in this project world, like just the entire scope, what you owned, what the team owned, and what did that environment look like.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of young professionals forget that those are valuable things that they are putting on their resume to help me, who I'm a hiring manager. I've been a hiring manager for over 20 years. So when I'm interviewing, I'm looking for, you may not have real like paid experience to talk about, but you do have project work. I can see how you collaborated. I can see how you communicated. But you have to put it on the resume so that I can see it's worth the interview.
Now, what you just described makes my hair stand on end, what little I have left of it. And here's why. When we're little kids, we are inspired by the stories that elders tell us, our parents, our friends, and so forth. And those stories often shape what we think we might want to do when we grow up, right? And then we get into school and we're pounded into, this is the way you have to do it.
Mhm.
And this is what a hiring manager wants to see. And you got to do what they want, right? And that gets you away from all that wonderful storytelling, which kind of is a reflection of the beauty you might see in the mirror. So what are some of the challenges that you have, Briar, when you're working with somebody, let's say, who is looking to get into an entry-level opportunity on a career track, but they're doing all these things? Well, this is what I'm told I need to have.
Yeah.
And get them away from that and towards the beauty of their own narrative. What are your thoughts?
Well, I actually, if you think about it systematically, it's understanding, again, the target. And what are those things that you're seeing on the job description? When I look at a job description and I see collaborative environment, team leader, mentor, and then I look at a resume that shows me, hey, they work at Habitat for Humanity. I got, mentorship. Like, I'm now translating what I want out of a person, like holistic candidate, right? Not just like a list of, because we have keywords on a resume, and that is your list format of, so that you can get the interview. And I'll go through that in a second.
Right.
But the bullets and the descriptors and your profile, those things are telling you a story as a hiring manager or recruiter. And so there are areas within a resume that you have to listen to the, hey, this is how you're going to get to the interview, right? But then you have to think about a resume in regard to the actual interview. As a hiring manager, I want to be able to talk about what you've done, and I need a little bit of reference in order to do so. That's part of the storytelling. That's the bullets. That's the descriptor. That's your summary section. But then in order to get seen and have that phone call, you need to pass an ATS, an applicant tracking system. And so I would say don't get discouraged because, yes, you have to do these things, but lean into the storytelling where you can, and then use ATS, the applicant tracking system within organizations, as a catalyst for you to get seen. It's just as good a tool as it is a bad tool to have in your kind of corner. So when you have a tool that can successfully sort candidates, if you're doing your job on the kind of ATS side of it, building keywords, you have a better chance of being seen. And I just want to give one anecdote here. I post roles on a quarterly basis for our organization for Career Organic. And last year I posted a role and I had 1,250 applicants.
Good Lord.
Okay, for one role. And I utilize a system, I utilize the Mom Project as my recruitment system. And so they have a program that kind of sorts, I think this is a really good match, not a good match. And for me, that's a huge help. I'm a small organization. We run about 20 to 25 team members at max, not looking to grow it much more than that. And so we're a small team. I can't go through 1,250 applications. And so the people that optimized their application are the people I saw first. So I see that both as, yes, it's something you have to do, and it is a lift, and it is what it is. But additionally, in that regard, if you took that time, you really wanted that job, you have a better chance of being seen because of that tool.
So let's talk about that tool. I put up a little screen of a dashboard
Yep.
you're familiar with.
Yep.
Tell me why the metrics here are important and what they're all about, and how we can become more intentional in our writing so that
Mhm.
scores may be higher than 63.
Sure. So again, it's the translation. And so you have to think about three audiences. Okay.
Mhm.
So when we write resumes at Career Organic, everybody needs to talk to these three audiences. First
Mhm.
is the ATS, which is the applicant tracking system.
Okay.
So you put your application in, you attach your resume,
Mhm.
and it scans your resume, pulls all the content off your resume,
Mhm.
and then it's checking it against the job description. So if the job description is for a sales role,
Mhm.
it is looking for the word sales or sales pipeline or clients or deals or goals, whatever it might be for that job description that's pertinent for them. And then it's scanning your resume and saying, hey, do I see sales? Do I see sales pipeline? Do I see B2B? Like whatever that target is. If it doesn't, you get a very low score, and you don't get to that next round, which is the recruiter calling you to pre-screen you and talk about what your experience is. And so the ATS findings and the formatting and the skills match, that's very, very important per job description. What this doesn't mean, though, is that you can't write a resume that covers a lot of that
Mhm.
and then change out your skills section on the resume to the specific keywords that this job is asking for. So for instance, we apply to a sales role, we only have sales on our resume once. That would tell me maybe you don't have enough experience. And that's what the tool is looking for. Do you have enough experience to warrant a phone call from a recruiter, right? That's all it's doing, is saying, hey, I've selected these 25 candidates as potential matches for you, Mr. or Mrs. Recruiter, to go ahead and call. And so now they can actually handle 25 versus the 350 that applied. And so the skills match, you could see it says 17 of 42 match. So this particular posting has 42 keywords that it is looking for to match you up against. And so it has part of that as a big lift for you to just make sure that you're doing this. I have a little hack though for anybody listening. So, and I love this one because this is free. Okay. You can take a job description and you can pull up like a Google Word Cloud or a Word Cloud app, like free generate. Okay. And you can Google these Word Cloud. You look it up, paste the job description into it. And what a word cloud does is it pulls the repeated words into the largest word. Okay. So if the largest word is sales, then you have to hit sales a lot on this application. So make sure that those words are coming across. And I pick like the top 5 to 7, put that in, and then you look at your technical skills. So if you're in technology, or even data science and all of those, they have very specific technologies and platforms and software systems that they want you to know, and make sure that you have those listed on your resume as well. It's like a really quick way to understand what is most important for this application without spending money on job scan, without having to spend 25 minutes per application.
That is sage advice. I want to get to the sample resume that you provided me to talk to. And folks, for purposes of illustration, I broke the resume into 3 parts just to make it a little easier to see on the screen. I really like this header, the way you've arrayed information, especially the skill array. So I'm wondering if you could talk to this first part, Briar.
Sure. So you'll see it's kind of, we have some white space on it. This is, again, we don't have to have color on every resume, but we do have different templates based on the industry you're in. So like this is a, marketing, maybe a fun technology like UX design. This is a human resources one. And so depending on where you're going to be applying, we want to make sure that kind of matches the vibe. Blue is, I'm just going to point that out because it is here. And so if you're watching, blue is my favorite color of choice because for red, green, colorblind individuals, it comes up as is. If you use a red or a green, it may have a different hue, show up as gray. So this is highly accessible. So just remember that. And then we always use a summary section. The summary section, how I like you to look at it is, we have human resources leader in this particular one. Don't forget to put the title. So if you are a junior web developer, you want to put junior web developer. If the next role says front end web developer, we change that out. So it's a really important tiny tweak that makes a big difference because that ATS we were just talking about scans titles. That's a great way to get the title in if you don't have it already. Okay. And then driving growth across community outreach. What we want to do in this top summary section is really just tell the person, what are we doing? What do we bring to the table on a consistent basis? Like, what is our jam? And that's how I think about this. And then everything else is all ancillary support systems that help you get that job done. So what are those call outs? When we get to the skill section, and this is what I was talking about earlier. So if you do that word cloud and you're going for a human resources leader role or an executive role, and maybe they don't have strategy development there. We might take strategy development out and put people management. Maybe that's the high level keyword that comes out in your word cloud. And so all we're doing is kind of rotating out and manipulating this resume in the skill section, which makes it super easy. You're not going through the entire resume. Stick here. Make sure those keywords are relevant there. It is less for the recruiter and the hiring manager and more for the ATS to have these skills. So that's kind of like a quick breakdown to help you think about it. Like get the tool working for you, create a skill section so that you can easily manipulate it. It takes 5 minutes and get the application in.
I have always felt that the top third of page one is the most important real estate on that resume. I used to have hiring managers who had very short attention spans, and this was before ATS, and that's probably the problem. They were reading a lot of resumes.
Yeah.
This array of information is so telegraphic that if I used to run a test with my wife teaches school kids in public school, and I would go in and I would do a little test of a generic resume to see how much they would remember, and I would give them 15 seconds. Earlier, years ago, I used to do 25, but I know our attention spans are tight. So I'd do 15 seconds and I would see how well they would remember information from different types of resumes. And it's this kind of array of information that had the highest recall. So I'm really pleased that you have this arrangement. It's really very important. The summary I used to call a unique value proposition. Yeah. And the skills are the must-haves as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And if you do that right and you do it in this kind of an arrangement, it's really very easy for a highly distracted hiring manager to read and recall, right?
Yes. Yes.
So let's move on to, well, you got a body, and so that's usually chronological.
So this one's an interesting one. So I kind of sent you a different take on resume. And so this particular one is what I call a category resume. And so this person has both human resources experience and then other experience that helps as an ancillary support system, but doesn't really go with the human resources vibe, right? And so a lot of people have this split in their experience. And so if it's big enough, then we can do a category resume where instead of saying professional experience, this particular one says human resources experience. It's a call out. And then we put the most pertinent roles and experience underneath that category. And what it does is people sometimes make transitions back into an environment that maybe they weren't in for the last 4 years.
Right.
And then how do we tell that story, right? Maybe they were a chef at a restaurant for the last 2 years and they loved it, but they really want to go back to ops management. If I show the chef and not the ops roles, they might get dismissed immediately if a recruiter is looking at them, okay? And so for those particular situations, we'll use a category resume with a call out. So like we put operations, management experience and pull that up to the top, because now we're looking at prime real estate, right? Like this is
Right.
the first role I'm going to see.
Right.
And I automatically think, oh, they have experience in this, rather than trying to vet through the entire resume and not even getting to the relevancy. So this particular resume is to help people with that split, or people coming back into an industry or type of function that they haven't had in recent years. And then the one thing that I will call out for this particular resume is that what we don't have is descriptors. And so depending on where you are in your career, this is great for early and mid-career, where maybe you don't have the full accountability of a role yet, you're still growing,
Right.
And you can use these bullets to really highlight what those achievements and accomplishments and contributions are. But as you progress, if we're talking senior, director, executive, we want a descriptor, and it's just kind of a little line underneath that title. So executive admissions advisor, we'd have a one line, it's not a bullet, and we're telling a little bit more about the accountability of that person. Maybe they were recruited to build a team of 10. Maybe they launched a new market, and we can call that out very quickly for a recruiter there and then go into their achievements.
One of the things I used to get triggered on very easily with candidates is they'd send me a resume, and I'd always say to them, talk to numbers, not actual numbers.
Yeah.
And sometimes people would just send in percentages. I ran a unit that had a 67% increase in ROI to what, $5?
Yeah.
You have to speak to real numbers, especially, right, Briar, if you're in hunter sales, if you're in new business development.
Yeah.
I want to know, what was your bogey? What was your sales nut? And how well did you meet that target or exceed it? So you need to talk to numbers, either especially dollars, well, absolutely dollars if you are in that kind of a role. If you are a property manager like this person, you speak to 500 plus units. That's a pretty big responsibility. That's real.
Yep.
The percentages and the things like that are descriptors. They tell you why that number is important.
Yeah. Well,
But
and one note or addition to that is that over recent years with COVID, timelines have become even more important, because if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, any of those, investments up front that a company has to take on, right, before the ROI comes, they need to understand how quickly you make that happen. And so with COVID, everybody lost their sales. Everybody was really struggling with their marketing and cutting.
Right.
And so if you are going into a sales role or a marketing role, having timelines on execution and when you've closed deals, when you've created those relationships, did you expedite the pipeline? Those are really great metrics to add in as well.
And I'll add to that, the speed in which we do things now is incredibly important. I did a show a couple of weeks ago where increasing the speed of my outcomes was a directive in the technology we buy to make ourselves more efficient on the job. So speed is certainly a big driver. I want to get to the last part of this. And I also want to tee up a question from Stuart Katz, who asks, where do you recommend placing educational history? And does your career level affect that consideration? Now, you put it at the end of this resume.
Yep.
Give me the counter argument.
This is a great question.
Yeah.
Great question. So there's two considerations. One, early career. If you don't have a lot of experience, education absolutely can be at the top because it explains it immediately. Okay. If I'm looking at a senior director and they have education at the top, I'm like, Have they just had an academic career, right? Like they went all the way through, got their master's, don't have a ton of work experience. That would be my consideration. And so it's actually a red flag for me if I see it
Oh,
on top of a senior level resume as a
mhm,
hiring manager.
mhm.
'Cause I'm looking for the lack of experience coming next
Right.
versus seeing it at the end. The only time I would say we can move it up is, say you just got your master's degree, or say you just got, you passed the bar, JD, like those things can be nice call outs that help your application. But I'm also of the opinion that you put it in your summary. So like you can very quickly say like, utilizing or leveraging a master's degree in, public health safety, to roll programs out, blah blah blah, right? So I think there's a place for that in a summary for people that are much more experienced in their career versus someone coming straight out of college. And I have a limit. So like my team knows after 2 years of experience, we move the education down.
Right. That's a really good insight. That's a really good insight. Well, Leon Glazer, you're crushing it today. I've never had follow-up questions, so props to you, my friend. He asks, is there any room on a resume for skills that, on the surface, aren't relevant, but might make one uniquely qualified for a role? Or should we wait for the interview? That is
Okay.
a great question.
Yes. So I would say, yes, you can add certain things into a resume, but it kind of provokes me to say I'd love that on a cover letter.
Mm,
When we have uniqueness that we're bringing to the table that completely sets us apart from other candidates, I think that a cover letter allows you to elaborate on that without wasting space. And it's also a little bit more relevant where you can speak in the third person, you're being a bit more vulnerable and personal with someone, but doesn't mean you can't create like a one line or a little snippet in the resume to create that intrigue in an interview. It's just we don't want a ton of things on the resume that aren't translating or need further translation to even understand it in the first place.
we live in an age of creators. I'm a creator. I live and work and breathe social media, and I pump out a lot of content. For people who are in that kind of work, what are the guidelines for linking your social media hubs and perhaps selected content that you've created?
I think if it's relevant to the role, it's relevant to the resume.
Mhm.
We look at UX designers, we look at
Right.
creative directors, and they have portfolios. I know that I've hired social media managers in the past for Career Organic, and it's one of the first things I'm looking at.
Mm.
And if you make my life easy, where I don't have to go and stalk you online to find that information, all the better. So if it's relevant to the role, it should be on your resume, and you should not ever label anything that's on your resume as relevant. Some people put relevant experience.
Right.
If it's on your resume, it should be relevant.
It
So
should be
we don't
relevant.
have to have that header.
That's our final thought. Before we leave, Briar Dougherty, thank you so much. I want to ask you, what is your work fit? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes work a part of your day, doing many meaningful things and not just your day? What are your thoughts?
I would say this is so at Career Organic in particular, I run a parent friendly environment for my entire team. And so parent you could be a fur baby, you could be any type of baby. Okay. I love coming to work and seeing Slack open up and we take pictures of where we are or our sunrise, and you get to feel connected even in a remote environment.
Mm,
But I also love when I get to see a message like, hey, dentist appointment with the kids today, and be back in an hour. I love that flexibility because I'm a mom. I have
mm,
2 kids. I homeschool on top of everything else that I do. And I love that I get to do that. I love that I have those moments of, kids running around. I love even when I'm on a phone call with a team member and, some child comes running across the screen or a cat tail is like flicking up. It makes it real. I want to work with humans. I don't want to work with automations and, technology. I want that interaction and that connection. And I want others to have that where I'm working as well, not just me.
That is just wonderful. Before we go, I want to thank Courtney Owens, Leon Glazer, and Stuart Katz for some amazing questions today. Briar Dougherty, if somebody wanted to find you on social media, start up a conversation, perhaps look into you to help them with their resume, or to follow you, how would they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place. That is really where I love to live. I am, I believe, the only Briar Dougherty on LinkedIn, if you kind of look me up. My inbox is open to everyone. I love having those conversations. If anybody needed additional support from my team, careerorganic.com. We have a form you can fill out or even schedule time on our calendar to actually have a consultation. We do free consultations and resume reviews.
I think we want to get you back on to continue this conversation on resumes.
I
But
would
you know
love it.
what? But you know what else? Talk about what it's like being a mom who's running a successful business and homeschooling her kids. That to me is amazing. I want to know more about that. So I hope we can bring you back for that as well. Thank you
I
so
would
much,
love it.
Briar.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, we will see you in March 2023. Have a good and successful day. See you soon.